Okay, hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar about the Canadian School Travel Planning Toolkit, hosted by Green Communities Canada. We'll be keeping everyone in the audience on mute throughout this webinar, so if you have any technical issues or problems with the audio quality and any questions that you have, please use the chat box facility and send your message to everyone, and we'll be tracking the chat box throughout the webinar with time for questions at the end. We are recording this webinar and we'll make the slides and the recording available on our website. So some introductions. My name is Kate Berry and I am the Senior Programme Manager at Green Communities Canada, responsible for the Ontario Active School Travel Programme. I'm a civil engineer by trade and I previously worked as a school traffic plan coordinator for the Upper Grand District School Board. I was working with schools to improve traffic safety, reduce vehicle congestion and increase student active travel. And presenting with me today is Stephanie Hahn, who first began working with Jackie Kennedy and Green Communities Canada on school travel planning in 2006. Stephanie acted as the project manager for the pilot testing of the STP model for Canada, creating the first version of the STP Toolkit with input from project partners. And since then, she has worked on various STP-related projects for Green Communities Canada, Heart and Stroke Foundation, and Metrolinx. So we've given the School Travel Planning Toolkit a major update and refresh for spring 2018. So this webinar provides an overview of the STP process and the toolkit contents, and we will be highlighting the new and updated features along the way. We've allowed time for questions at the end of this session, so please type any questions in the chat box and send to everyone. And we'll be compiling questions as they come in, and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. The Green Communities Canada has been a leading organisation promoting active school travel in Canada since 1996, and we do this through research, advocacy, training, educational resources, events, partnerships, and on-the-ground programming. Ontario Active School Travel is the new programme name for GCC's work to promote active school travel, which was previously branded as Active and Safe Routes to School. Our goal for the Ontario Active School Travel programme is simple: to make walking, cycling and other forms of active and sustainable transportation the norm for school trips. The Ontario government has provided Green Communities Canada with $3.5 million over 3 years to take active school travel to the next level in the province, from October 2017 through to August 2020. As part of that initiative, we have updated our website and we've launched new social media channels for Ontario Active School Travel Programme in April. So please connect with us on these platforms to keep informed of the tools, resources and the funding that may be available to support your work. We have, as a little contest, we have 2 copies of the children's book, Yellow Bicycle, to give away. So for a chance to win those, please post a photo or story about active school travel in Ontario and tag it with the handle @OntarioAST. And then my final item that I wanted to plug before we really get started is that this week is Bike to School Week. And for the first time ever, this event is open to all schools in Ontario to register participants and benefit from the resources and prizes available. The Ontario campaign is organised by Cycle Toronto and CultureLink with financial support from Metrolinx and Ontario Active School Travel Programme. If you're in Ontario and the schools in your community are running bike events this May and June, please encourage them to register online. Thank you. Okay, so whilst GCC's current work is largely focused on the province of Ontario, we have a long history of promoting active school travel across Canada. We developed the School Travel Planning Toolkit as a national resource, and we continue to support and promote it for use by communities across the country. Green Communities Canada first investigated international best practices in school travel planning back in 2006 and developed a framework for Canada that we then pilot tested in 4 provinces between 2007 and 2009. We used the findings of that pilot to create the first edition of the STP Toolkit, and then that was tested through a national pilot project funded by CLASP, the Coalition Linking Action and Science for Prevention. And that project saw STP implemented in 120 schools across all provinces and territories of Canada, from 2010 to 2012. Since then, GCC has delivered STP on the ground in Toronto and Ottawa for several years and has supported various pilot projects and feasibility studies in communities across Ontario in partnership with Metrolinx and other regional and provincial stakeholders. Over that time, we have periodically updated the toolkit in response to experiences and lessons learned. So we're very excited and proud to launch this 5th edition of the STP Toolkit. We began work on this latest update in the fall last year, 2017. And we did that by undertaking consultation with STP practitioners across Canada to gather their feedback and identify areas for improvement. We really gratefully acknowledge all of the people who have contributed to this update process. And in particular, we would like to thank Laura Zeglin, Ami de Francia, Sandra Jones, Wallace Beaton, and Natalia Diaz-Incens. So now I'm going to hand over to Stephanie Hahn, and she's going to take us through an overview of the school travel planning process and the guide for facilitators. So Stephanie, over to you to share your screen. And I will unmute you as well, Stephanie.
Okay. All righty. Can you hear me, Kate?
I can.
Okay. I'm assuming everybody else can, but no one else can answer. Thanks. Okay. So I'm going to assume that those of you participating in the webinar today already recognize that fewer kids are walking and wheeling for the school journey these days, that you already believe in the need for a coordinated effort to reverse that trend, and that you already understand the host of benefits of taking action. So today, I'm going to focus on describing Green Community's recommended solution to tackling this problem, which is school travel planning. So just a little recap for the newer folks. I'm going to very quickly go through how STP works, the process. So school travel planning is a 6-phase process that's pretty standard for any effort to facilitate change, in that it brings together a group of stakeholders to assess a situation, make and implement a plan to address the challenges that are identified, measure progress and adjust the plan, and do this in sort of an endless cycle of refinement. So this diagram illustrates those 6 phases for the STP process. For those of you that are familiar with past editions of the STP Toolkit, you'll notice that this diagram does look different than it did before. We've simplified it, we've color-coded it, we've separated phase 1 into 2 parts, and then we've added a 6th phase. So what I do want to note, though, is that nothing has really fundamentally changed about the recommended process. We've really just captured the existing recommended process from before in a new way visually. So phase 1 was split into 2 parts, A and B, to make it more clear that there is setup work that needs to take place at a regional or municipal level first, and that is followed by setup activities at the school level. During phase 1A, the regional STP committee is established. So I wanted to note here that after much discussion amongst us, it's very tricky to come up with exactly what we're officially going to call things, but we did decide to call this level of committee a regional STP committee, and we chose that term because we felt that it's a broad term that could refer to either a single municipality or it could refer to multiple municipalities operating in a single region. But of course, your committee at this level may be called something else in practice, but it would have, these stakeholders in it. So during this setup phase, the regional committee works to build initial commitment to active school travel work. And then one of the key things they're going to do is either hire or designate someone to be the STP facilitator, the person who then works directly with individual schools. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to have this little bullseye icon come up. In the new toolkit, we have a page near the beginning that summarizes what we call the keys to success for STP. This is one of them, having an STP facilitator, somebody designated to spearhead the work and act as the liaison between all of the stakeholders. The title for the position may differ from place to place, but the role is definitely key. So in phases 1B and beyond, those will happen after a facilitator is in place. So schools are selected during phase 1B, and then a school level committee is formed. So that's another key to success, having a broad range of stakeholders involved on these two levels of committees. The more diverse these committees are, the more effective they generally are at affecting change. So I wanted to note, again, for people who are familiar with the old toolkit, that we have tweaked the stakeholder diagram from past editions. Nothing about the actual stakeholders that are recommended is different. We've just used more descriptive terms in some places, and we've grouped some of them in a slightly different way. All right, so just one regional committee is established per region, but one school committee is formed for each school that a facilitator works with. So this diagram shows how a single facilitator would be working with 4 schools, 1 regional committee. However, I just wanted to note that the actual number of schools that a facilitator would work with might vary, not necessarily 4. All right, in phase 2, you assess the conditions at a given school. So this is also sometimes referred to as baseline data collection. And a lot has changed in this edition of the toolkit with regards to data collection, and Kate will be going over that a bit later in the presentation. Phase 3 is action planning. During this phase, the 2 levels of committee are involved in crafting a custom plan for each school to address the unique challenges that were identified in phase 2. This is another key to success, tailoring STP to the needs of each school rather than implementing sort of one-size-fits-all solutions across all schools. So when you're developing an action plan, it's really important to keep the goals of STP in mind. Ultimately, STP is striving to increase the rates of active school transportation. That's that acronym you see up at the top there, AST, so walking and wheeling. So to achieve that, we work to accomplish several sub-goals. We've got increasing awareness of the many benefits of active school travel. Then we've got making active school travel a more convenient and safer choice. That might also involve making driving a private vehicle more inconvenient. And then the third one there, the sub-goal is increasing confidence about active school travel, and then increasing motivation to choose active school travel. So by keeping these goals in mind, it can help you craft a comprehensive action plan. And I wanted to note too that part of making active and safe routes to school safer, that sub-goal number 2 there, could involve working to get more students in the bus zone riding the bus, since that decreases traffic in the school zone area and can help improve safety for everybody. So now let's explore what types of interventions could be included in an action plan to help achieve each of those sub-goals. So this is where we're going to start to see how the 5 E's can tie into the goals. So we've got education activities are primarily the ones used to increase awareness of active school travel benefits, things like media coverage, newsletter articles, social media. And then when we want to improve safety and convenience of active school travel, it'll typically involve engineering initiatives, such as those listed there, ways to decrease speeds in the school zone, for instance, as well as enforcement activities. Sometimes ticketing campaigns by police or by law enforcement can help make active school travel safer. When it comes to increasing confidence about AST, then action plans would usually include education measures. So you'll see education appears in 2 spots here. So we can think about education initiatives, interventions. There are different kinds, right, to achieve different goals. So over here, we have education measures such as training programs to teach students about walking and cycling safety, because that helps increase both student and parental confidence about active school travel. And then finally, encouragement activities are typically used to increase motivation to choose active school travel. And this is where in the past, like a lot of well-known active school travel interventions fall into this category of encouragement. Things like walking and wheeling events, whether they're annual or weekly, having awards, walking clubs, that sort of thing. So this diagram doesn't show it, but evaluation is another key component that's woven throughout the STP process and will be included in a comprehensive action plan as well. So evaluation activities can include tracking participation in individual interventions, tracking progress with implementation in a systematic way, and then conducting regular data collection to monitor progress. So those are evaluation type activities that can also appear in an action plan. So this diagram helps make it clear why it is so important to include a comprehensive suite of interventions that address all 5 E's in each action plan so that you can reach the goals. So that using the 5 E's approach is another one of those keys to STP success. In phase 4, the action plan is implemented and implementation is tracked. In phase 5, we've got follow-up data collection happening to reassess the conditions. Kate will be addressing that later. So phase 6, the newly added phase, Keep It Going, articulates the recommended steps for building capacity within the 2 levels of STP committee so that work continues at individual schools once a facilitator moves on to new schools. We recommend that a facilitator work intensively with a given school for 2 to 3 years before moving on to new schools. But once they do, you want to have a solid stakeholder committee and processes in place for the work to continue in the absence of a dedicated facilitator working with the schools. Keeping up efforts over the long term, as phase 6 emphasizes, is another one of the keys to success. So now I'm going to talk specifically about the toolkit. One of the biggest changes is that we've created 2 main guides instead of 1. So each of the new guides addresses a different audience. One is for the regional stakeholders and the other is for facilitators. So the guide for regional stakeholders and the associated tools with that cover phase 1A in depth, because that's the work that is exclusively the responsibility of regional stakeholders. And then the guide goes on to explain the role of regional stakeholders and their tasks in supporting a facilitator through the remaining phases. Then we have the guide for facilitators and its associated tools, which describes in depth what a facilitator will do in phases 1B through 6. So these guides have been designed so that each audience really only needs to read the one guide that is geared to them. So there is some overlap between the contents of the 2 guides, particularly in the introduction sections. Kate's going to talk later about the contents of the regional guide. So for now, I'm going to go over some of the key new features of the guide and tools that are geared for facilitators. So the new guide for facilitators has much of the same information in it as it did before, with some new additions and edits. And how the information is organized and displayed visually has changed a fair bit. There's an introduction section with background information about school travel planning, including that summary page I was describing about keys to success. And then after that, there's a section that goes through each of the 6 STP phases step by step. So each phase has its own designated color, consistent with its color in the STP process diagram. At the beginning of each phase, there's an overview page like the one that's shown here for phase 1B. At the bottom, it shows a list of the key tasks for the facilitator in that particular phase. And then because a school travel plan document is written over time throughout the STP process, this page also includes a list of which sections of the school travel plan are to be completed during this phase. And then the subsequent pages that follow this in a given phase, they each, they'll go into those tasks at the bottom in more detail, and the tasks are numbered for easy reference. Anytime a tool is mentioned throughout the document. You can see here at the bottom in the text checklist, some of the tools are mentioned, school agreements, etc. They're bold and underlined here and anywhere else throughout this document. And whenever you see a bold and underlined item, it's one of the tools. If you click on it, it is a link to that individual tool online. Also new, at the end of the section about the 6 phases, we've included a handy tasks list and tools summary. This is an overview of the tasks for each of the phases and their associated tools. So each of the mentions of a tool in this summary that's bolded and underlined is also a different way that you can access the tools. And this page that's shown here on this slide is just the first of 3 pages for that particular summary. So some new additions or major modifications to the contents for the guide for facilitators. We've got suggestions on how to make your STP program more equitable, meaning more accessible and useful for individuals of all socioeconomic status, diverse ethnicities, people with mobility or sensory limitations, etc. These mentions appear throughout the guide in boxes with dotted lines around them, like the one that you see there. There's also a new tool to help facilitators conduct bikeabouts. We've included a new section on working with secondary schools. It appears as an appendix in the guide and discusses ways in which the STP process may vary when you're working with the older audience. Also in that appendix, there is a sample survey for secondary schools. And then we've also created a series of new introduction pieces for different audiences. Each one is a 2-pager. There's 3 different versions, one for parents, one for teachers, and one for principals, as part of the facilitator tools. There is actually another 4-page overview, but it is part of the regional toolkit, or the regional guide and tools. All right, another new addition is that facilitators are now encouraged to work with stakeholders to develop a vision for STP and set targets at each school. So these targets would be captured in the first edition of a school travel plan document. And then as you make progress toward those targets over time, you would be recording, actuals beside your targets in subsequent revisions of the plan. So that's what's recommended now in the school travel plan template. This particular slide here highlights 2 of the most important metrics that we recommend setting targets for: walking and wheeling rates, and then school bus usage. But the toolkit does suggest additional metrics as well that you can consider setting some targets for and tracking. So there's more that's changed in the facilitator guide and tools, but those are the key highlights. The last thing I just wanted to remind everybody about was that, as has always been the case, this STP Toolkit describes the recommended process for STP, and it provides tool templates. Each community is really encouraged to customize the process and tools to suit their needs, and these things have been provided as a starting point for you. So that's it for me. Thanks so much, and I'll hand it back to Kate.
Thank you, Stephanie. Sorry, I'm just having a little delay with my microphone there. That's fantastic. So I was going to continue on from where Stephanie left off, talking about vision and target setting, and focus on the data collection that occurs as part of the school travel planning process. So within the toolkit, there are 5 key data collection tools. And it's the facilitator who handles the data entry and analysis of all of the information data collected through these tools. Data collection is a really important part of school travel planning for many reasons. The information gathered in the school profile form at the outset in phase 1 sets the context for interpreting the data collected in the later phases. So, for example, knowing the total enrollment and the percentage of students who live in the walk zone is important context when analysing the travel survey data and developing targets for the school. Baseline data collection that happens in phase 2, assessing conditions, enables the STP committee to develop a detailed understanding of the school's specific issues, and from those identify priority actions and set appropriate targets for their school. They're able to develop and implement an action plan that is realistic and effective because it is based on evidence. And then you have the follow-up data collection in phase 5, and that is important for the evaluation of an STP project to measure progress with implementation and assess the impact of the completed actions over time. The collection and dissemination of data also presents many opportunities to engage stakeholders in the STP process in a really meaningful way. So students can help to run the travel survey in their classroom and share the results with their peers. Parents can take the opportunity to share their ideas and concerns about the school journey in the family survey. Teachers can use the travel survey data as part of classroom learning activities. And regional stakeholders can participate in the walkabout and the traffic observation to experience firsthand the travel challenges faced by students, parents, and staff. All of the data collected forms an important school-specific evidence base that can support the longevity of an STP program and the achievement of the long-term goals. By demonstrating the value of the process, regional stakeholders are able to make a robust case for future investment in active school travel infrastructure and programming. So let's look at the data collection tools in a little more detail. The school profile was already part of the information that we documented in the school travel plan report. But in this edition of the toolkit, we are recognizing it more formally as a data collection tool. And so we have updated the school profile form to include new and more specific data fields. The student travel survey is conducted as a hands-up survey by teachers with their class every school day for 1 week. Hence, the survey is capturing the travel modes used by the whole school population for both the journey to and from school. And we recommend that the student travel survey is conducted twice per year, ideally in October and May, so that changes in travel mode can be tracked consistently over a period of years. The format of the survey is a hands-up survey, and research has shown this to be a valid, reliable tool for use with elementary school children. The student travel survey is currently administered as a paper-based survey, and it does take a lot of time for the facilitator to enter the results into the data analysis tool that's within the toolkit. So we are currently working to develop an online automated version of the student travel survey ready for release later in 2018. Feedback from practitioners and our own experience told us that the existing family survey in the toolkit was not being frequently used, and when it was used, the participation levels were often low. So we have therefore developed a new version of the family survey for this edition of the toolkit. The new family survey template features new and revised questions and is designed to take parents approximately 5 minutes to complete. So it's designed as a short survey. The data collected through this family survey, it not only helps to assess travel conditions, but it also helps to inform the locations for the walkabout and the traffic observation survey. So it's informing other elements of the data collection process. Green Communities Canada is currently working to develop an online automated version of the family survey ready for release later in 2018. But in the meantime, the family survey can be administered as a paper-based survey, or the template questions can be entered into an online survey tool such as SurveyMonkey. In past editions of the toolkit, there was a tool that it combined the traffic observation and with a traffic count. But based on feedback from practitioners, we've made a traffic observation as a standalone and recommended data collection tool. It provides valuable information that can be collected in a short period of time by one person or a small group. So we're no longer recommending a full traffic count done by a team of volunteers over a week-long period, as we did in previous editions, because really that's very resource intensive, and the data that it yields is not always considered valid for transportation planning purposes, for instance, by municipal staff. So instead, we now recommend that the facilitator works with regional and municipal traffic and transportation staff to have them conduct professional assessments of traffic volume and speed. Or maybe they can share data that they already hold on file. And we've also added an optional data collection suggestion in the guide to conduct manual counts of specific metrics on a small scale, such as, like the number of cars using a kiss and ride, or number of bikes in bike racks. So that's still something that we encourage the facilitator and the school committee to undertake small scale counting. Okay, and then last but not least is the walkabout survey. And it's in fact one of the most important parts of the entire STP process. Stakeholders from both the school and the regional committees should be invited to participate in the walkabout, as well as students. And the walkabout is critical because it gets stakeholders to walk together as a group through the school neighbourhood and experience the issues firsthand. The walkabout group usually spends about 2 or 3 hours to complete both the walk and then have a debriefing session to review what was seen and start to brainstorm the solutions for their action plan. And then a new piece for this toolkit, we've also created a Bikeabout tool, and that guides a facilitator to carry out an additional data collection. If they're working with a school that, for instance, has a keen interest in improving cycling infrastructure in their neighbourhood, then the Bikeabout tool is appropriate for that, and it's very similar to the walkabout, but obviously conducted on bicycles. Before the facilitator sets any of those data collection tools into action, it's really essential that they first obtain permission to collect data at the school level from the school board and/or the school principal. And it's important for us to note here that the type of data that we collect for school travel planning and the way that the data is used in the STP process is considered program evaluation. It's not considered research work. So that means that research ethics review is not required under the Tri-Council policy statement that governs human research in Canada. However, individual school boards each have their own policies regarding evaluation activities that must be adhered to. So obviously it's important to consult the local school board's policy, documentations and timelines well in advance of commencing data collection activities. In this edition of the toolkit, we have updated and expanded the guidance provided for obtaining permission for data collection. So if the school board does require ethics approval, the guide for facilitators and the guide for regional stakeholders both include an appendix about ethics approval, and the updated sample ethics application in the toolkit will help with the process of preparing an ethics application if it is required by the school board. It can be quite a daunting and complicated task to fill in school board ethics applications. So this tool will really help a facilitator with that task. Note that school boards in Canada often have a research and evaluation committee that oversees data collection. So although the facilitator is conducting program evaluation work, it's likely that they may have to use the same application form as is used for research projects. And the sample ethics application tool takes that into consideration. And we ourselves, Green Communities Canada, have used this tool successfully to obtain school board ethics approval for school travel planning. And we are also, we're very happy to help anyone, provide guidance and support to any facilitators who are preparing an application and are finding that challenging. Some keys to success for school board ethics approval include having a clear process for ensuring the consent of participants. And this should begin with a principal who will then advise school staff of their roles in the data collection and invite students and parents to participate in the surveys. Also being clear that participation by students and families is voluntary, not mandatory. And lastly, ensuring that data collected is anonymous and is stored securely. So the final new piece of the toolkit that we are pleased to present is the guide for regional stakeholders. We developed this tool because the support of regional and municipal stakeholders is so important to the success of school travel planning process that's happening at the school level. It's also a reflection that school travel planning has really moved, well beyond pilot projects at individual schools in Canada and is now being successfully delivered in several regions of Ontario and across Canada on a regionally coordinated scale. So the purpose of this new guide is to help those regional, municipal level stakeholders to establish, implement and support an STP program. And that guide is supported by a new overview of school travel planning. It's a 4-page brochure targeted at those stakeholders. And it's to provide them, with an introduction to school travel planning and encourage their support and participation. So that's intended as, really as a marketing tool for school travel planning. The guide includes detailed information to help each of the various regional stakeholders understand their roles and responsibilities in the school travel planning process. So that includes this wheel diagram in the main body of the guide, and also a detailed table in Appendix 2 to really break down all of the responsibilities and opportunities for stakeholders to support active transportation and this STP process. The guide for regional stakeholders is styled to match the guide for facilitators. So it's using the same coloration of phases to aid navigation. And also in the same way, each phase chapter begins with the key tasks for the regional stakeholders. So those are highlighted on the first page of the phase. And then each task is described in detail in the following pages for that chapter. And as Stephanie mentioned, we added a 6th phase to the STP process for this edition of the toolkit. And this is particularly important in the guide for regional stakeholders and in the ways that those people can support school travel planning. So whether they are police, student transportation consortia staff, school board representatives, councillors, or otherwise, something that we really wanted to emphasize in this new guide is that those stakeholders have an important role to play in building public and political support for active school travel and developing policy procedures and practices that are supportive. Behaviour change is a long-term process, as is the planning, design and construction of active transportation infrastructure. So it's really important that the regional committee is engaged and operational over the long term to help drive progress at each STP school and preserve the continuity of the overall STP program in the region. Ultimately, we are all working together to reignite the culture of walking and wheeling to school, working towards this vision of Canadian school communities where kids who live in the bus zone use the bus, and kids in the walk zone walk or wheel to school, with not a single car in sight. So to conclude this presentation, we'd just like to take a quick poll survey to get a measure of the people who are participating in this webinar today. So the survey is going to appear on your screen in a moment. So if you could just take a quick moment, if you're able to vote for the category that best fits the organization that you represent. So here we go, let's try this out. Cool. Well, it's good watching them coming in. Who's in the lead? Public health is leading, with municipalities in second place. Fantastic. We'll just give it a few more seconds for final votes to come in. Excellent, thank you. So let's share the results. Here we go. Okay, so interesting mix today. Lots of public health representatives, which is great to see, and I'm really happy that we've got people in the audience from all of those different groups represented today. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for your attention today for this webinar. We're going to post a recording and a copy of the slides on our website soon. We now have some time for questions and discussion. So we'll start with any questions that came in during the presentation, but keep those coming in too. Just before we do that, I just want to highlight our next webinar coming up in June. So it will focus on the successes of the school traffic management program being implemented by Green Communities Canada and the Toronto District School Board. It's a program that's based on the school travel planning model, and its implementation is closely aligned with the City of Toronto's Vision Zero road safety strategy. So you can find a link to sign up for that webinar by looking in the news section on our website. Okay, so back to our webinar and to any questions. I don't think we have any arriving just yet. Let's see, what do we have? Hi, so we've got a question from Sultana. Hi, Sultana. You're asking, will we be providing new case studies as examples? Yes, we will. So I guess two key parts to answer your question. One of the tools in the toolkit that we haven't yet updated is the action plan inspiration guide. And so that the existing copy of that guide includes a lot of case studies. And over the summer, really, we're going to be working to update the content and add new case studies. And we'll also be looking at whether we can put that guide into an online format so it's more easily searchable for case studies and examples of successful actions to implement at the school level. And then the second, I guess, component to answer your question is that at least here in Ontario, with the funding from the Government of Ontario that Green Communities is using over the next over a 3-year program, the majority of the funding is being awarded to communities through an application-based process to support local active school travel programming. So we will be collecting a lot of information from the funded projects that's really going to help to build our library of case studies and reference material. So we really look forward to collecting that information and disseminating it with everybody. Okay, so and then a second question from Sultana. Many facilitators face roadblocks or some of their efforts fall short. Will you providing any how to navigate some of the challenges that come up? I think, Stephanie, you might want to comment on this too. I think we have tried to provide quite a lot of guidance and encouragement and anticipation of some of the barriers that facilitators face in the language and the content of the new facilitator guide, because it is, it is a challenging role, and so we are aware of some of the common challenges that they face, and we've tried to address that. And also the introduction of the guide for the regional stakeholders. Part of the idea of that is that really the regional stakeholders can support a facilitator and really help them to overcome some of those barriers, at the organizational level. And I think that the more that we're all able to work in a coordinated way, the more that we will be able to problem solve and troubleshoot. But very much in this new edition of the toolkit, we are encouraging all of the key players to support one another with troubleshooting. Stephanie, is there anything that you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I would just add that I notice that individual facilitators seem to be using that, seem to be using that online group email thing. I don't know what it's called, like a forum or whatever, to ask each other specific questions. And then people in the group that have experiences will answer, and then everybody gets copied on it. So Anybody that's working as a facilitator will want to make sure they're signed up for that, so that if they have a question, they can post it there and then, you know, take advantage of the expertise of the others that do the same jobs as you that may have run into something similar. And then the other thing I was just going to mention that I'm not sure if people are aware of is that Green Communities is going to be developing some training modules for facilitators, and those we haven't begun developing yet, but I would assume that there's going to be a fair bit of additional content that's going to be useful for helping facilitators navigate some of the common challenges.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, definitely over the course of the Ontario Active School Travel Program over the next 2 years, we are going to be continuously building on the support and resources that we were able to provide for our school travel planning, facilitation, and implementation. So yes, online training modules is one of the deliverables that we're going to be creating over the next year, and building those networks between practitioners so that we have a working group for facilitators to be able to share knowledge and to connect with one another and provide support. Do we have any other questions, Selena? Okay, thanks. So thanks everyone for your comments and questions. Question from Pam. She says, you mentioned the Hands Up survey is currently a paper tool. When will the online version be available? Our target for having an online version available is the fall of this year. So because we recommend data collection, particularly the student travel survey, that is conducted twice per year in October and May. Our goal is to have that tool available for October data collection this year. That's great. Do we have any other questions? Anyone else got any more questions? Okay, I'll give it a few more moments in case anyone, and if anyone has any general comments or stories or news that they want to share, you can also do that in the chat box. We can broadcast that. Yeah, we did have a question about the confirming the date of the next webinar, the Making School Zones Safer. That is happening on Thursday, the 20th of June, and at the same time as today, 1 till 2 p.m. Okay, yeah. So Pam, you're just asking if you can get a copy of the new family survey. Yes. So I guess as part of wrapping up, really, is to say that all of the new contents of the toolkit are now available on our website. So it's ontarioactiveschooltravel.ca/school-travel-planning/school travel planning toolkit, but you'll be able to find it from the main page through the menu navigation. And so the family survey template is there within phase 2 of the toolkit online. Yes, so we've updated the another question here about the traffic observation tool. Yeah, we've updated the tool, so it has new content to describe the process for traffic observation and to record traffic observations. And then we have a question from Josie. Will liability or legal responsibility be included as additional information? So we have one of the tools within the toolkit is called risk management and active school travel, and so that is slightly, it's dated now, that the content was developed in 2010, but the content still holds true, and that was produced by a risk management specialist, a professional, to give expert insight really into liability considerations. So that tool is there, and it's very useful for facilitators if they are encountering concerns amongst either at the school level or perhaps at school board level, or amongst the municipality. If there are uncertainties or concerns about liability associated with active school travel or with school travel planning, then that tool provides quite a comprehensive response and guidance for those kind of issues.
So I would just jump in there and point out that today's webinar was focused on highlighting what's new and different. So for people that are brand new, there's a lot that we didn't cover that will be covered in the training modules to come. But so there are a ton of tools that already existed that maybe have been tweaked a little bit or not touched at all, other than to change, say, the branding and use newer colors and whatnot. The liability, like the risk management tool about liability, the contents are almost exactly the same as the way they used to be before. So there is a ton of other great tools that are on the tool that are online as part of the toolkit that you'll want to go check out.
Okay, we also have a question from Justin, and his question is there an effort to bring in legislation or regulations governing school travel planning requirements? Justin, I'm not sure if you're able to expand on what you had in mind. Are you thinking in terms of mandating school travel planning for all schools, for example? I think I can say that at the moment I'm not aware of any, there aren't any proposals for legislation or regulations governing school travel planning, at a broad level. We are going to be doing more work in terms of policy scanning of what policy exists at all levels, whether that's national, provincial, regional, municipal, at the local school level. What policy procedures and practices exist that support school travel planning and active school travel, and where are the common gaps across the population. That is going to be something that we are collecting and studying through the Ontario Active School Travel Program. Yeah, definitely, Justin. I think looking to mandate school travel planning in all schools, we've heard that a lot from practitioners. Through the consultation and research work that we've done, most people feel that could be valuable. So it's something that I think we will continue to advocate for, and the work that we continue to do at Green Communities and the funding that we are providing to local communities in Ontario to implement school travel planning is going to continue really to build the evidence base for us to advocate for that, to continue to show the value of school travel planning. So that is still very much on the agenda and at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. Okay, great, thank you. I'll do a last call for questions. Excellent. Okay, well, I think that's good. If you think of any other questions after the call finishes, you're welcome to email us, stp@greencommunitiescanada.org, or get in touch with me directly, Kate. My email is kberry@greencommunitiescanada.org. We're always pleased to be in touch with people and to support your work. So thank you very much for attending this webinar today. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to being in touch. Thank you.